now, I want your calls on this. Should men's prisons only have male guards? Give us your thoughts, 0207 862 2222. In the last decade, the number of staff dismissed for having inappropriate relationships with inmates has doubled. In one prison alone, 18 women were sacked after or resigned after crossing relationship boundaries. The increase in cases coincides with a shift in the workforce. More workers are now sort of younger, female, less experienced. Some experts, like the chief executive of the Prisons Reform Trust, says that young, inexperienced staff are vulnerable and can be manipulated. So what is the solution? Is hiring just same-sex guards the solution? Should this be the case for women's prisons too? Lynn?
See, I think that young women are impressionable, and especially if, obviously, we don't know their personal lives, but if you have not experienced a level of attention from men, and then you go into a prison where there's men who are spending a long time in prison, and as crazy as this sounds, men who are incarcerated are very charming. They know how to manipulate, they know how to turn on the charm, and women can easily be sucked in by that. You know, all of a sudden, I'm made to feel like one of the most amazing, prettiest women on the planet, and where you haven't maybe had that attention, whether it was like growing up or at home or from previous boyfriends or in a turbulent relationship, you do get sucked in by that. And I do think we should be looking at male officers in male prisons.
All right.
No.
I mean, it's happening in women's prisons as well. But don't go anywhere. We're going to take your calls on this after the break. We're also going to hear from Henry.
Yes.
We've heard what Lynn has to say. Henry's chomping at the bit. Should they only have male guards? And I suppose you can talk about female prisons as well and whether they should just have female guards. 0207 862 2222. We heard from Lynn earlier on. She thinks it's same-sex guards is the best approach. Henry, what's your view on this?
I don't think that's reasonable at all. I think that's a massive overreaction. If you look at the figures, so 51 women fired over 5 years, that's 10 per year. And if you look at the number of women who are prison officers working both in male and female prisons, there's about 24,000 prison officers altogether. About
That's the ones we know about.
40% of them are female. So that's about, what, 10 or so thousand. 10 per year, that's tiny. And I think the problem is far more fundamental. The problem is to do with supervision, it's to do with the concentrated atmosphere that makes both men and women, prison officers, vulnerable, especially when they're young, and the lack of training. I mean, the amount of training they get is tiny. It's about 8 weeks with about a few hours on corruption or inappropriate relationships. It's not enough, and there's a huge turnover. It's like 12 to 13% of prison officers are leaving every year. That's what's at the heart of the problem.
You appreciate the people's concerns that actually we're getting less experienced, younger female.
Yep.
But you think it's less about the female and more about the being inexperienced, and we need to train them up more.
Absolutely.
Rather than throwing the baby out.
Absolutely.
Wait, hang on, but
Because we have a massive shortage.
Henry, answer me this.
Yep.
What training or experience can be given to prevent that from happening? Because I don't think it's a training thing. Women are well aware of what could happen. They know
Until you start the job.
It doesn't take a scientist to know I'm not supposed to have an inappropriate relationship with an inmate.
In that case, then, what would we do about the probation service? Because that's also part of the criminal justice system. And 70% of probation officers are women, and they're looking overwhelmingly after men. Nobody's saying that they're not capable of doing that. So why would we say that they shouldn't be allowed to look after men in the prison estate? It's all linked.
But going back to what you said, though, the reason why we're seeing more of these cases is because there's been more of anti-corruption investigation facilities to ensure that exactly. So this is just tip of the iceberg. And my thing is, also, I don't like the way how we're often, sometimes it can be the case, but not all women are these, you know, little vulnerable flowers. Some of them actually do enjoy the chase and the desire between male and female.
And I think that's inappropriate, and where the evidence is there, they will be fined, they'll be prosecuted. Some have even gone to jail. But I'm saying the overwhelming number of prison officers, both men and women, and I know a few
but it's also supporting
are doing a very
crime.
difficult, very, very dangerous in some circumstances and difficult job, and the training isn't there, and the shortage. We're 5,000 prison officers short. If we got rid of the women from men's prisons, it'll be even worse.
Right, let's go to the phone lines. Stephen from Greater Manchester, what's your reaction to this?
Unfortunately, I agree with what's being said. It's like, what I'm saying is like women can be overpowered by prisoners in that situation. So I don't agree that you should have women
I mean,
looking after the man.
Sorry, Stephen, you mean in a physical sense?
Yes, in the physical sense.
Yeah, and I can see, Stephen,
men will overpower
hold
women.
on, I can see your concern in that, but that's not what we're talking about here. I think what we're talking about is consensual inappropriate relationships, not unconsensual. And if you were talking about that, then we would really look at kicking male guards out of female prisons then. But what we're talking about...
You mean like women having activities with men?
Yes, but consensually. It's not, the men aren't physically overpowering them. That doesn't seem to be much of an issue.
No. But what I'm saying that's a different issue. Yeah, it's like say you have a lady who's sexually active with a man, then that's wrong.
Yeah, but this recent lady who we're discussing, she actually sent a purple thong to the inmate. That's not being overpowered. She wanted to entice him. Otherwise, why would she send him lingerie?
But Stephen does make a point that actually, in general, women are smaller than men, and that could be an issue going forward. That's not the issue we're talking about, Stephen, but it could be an issue. You're absolutely right. Thank you very much for your call. David from Berkshire, what's your thoughts on... I believe you've been to prison.
Yeah, a few times.
Okay. Well, then you're an expert on the panel then. What's going on? Why is this happening?
Yeah, it's utter nonsense. I mean, at the end of the day, prisoners tend to be, a lot of them, quite sneaky people. They're not actually interested in these women. They're compromising them and getting them to bring contraband into the prisons, and telephones, drugs, etc., weapons a lot of the time. The problem's the vetting procedures and the hiring procedures. They're hiring the wrong women, women who get caught. I know I've experienced it and I've witnessed it, that a female officer will get in amongst an argument and diffuse it, where a male officer would go in and it would just be like tipping.
David, this is excellent. David, I want to kind of build on that, because there is research showing that a female presence in the prison system or in a jail can not only diffuse, can also help with male prisoners' rehabilitation, makes them feel seen, heard and understood.
I bet it does.
Tell us more about that, David. No, but no, not the way you think.
But it is really
No, what David's saying is really important.
So, Lynn, what about that argument then that actually you need a bit of feminine energy in there to sort of cut the testosterone?
But I think an element of that is to impress the woman, or to, like, you know, I don't think it's from a place of we should.
But if it's helping to civilise the guy.
But then what's the aftermath? What's the aftermath? Maybe they're being able to diffuse it because they might be in cahoots with one of them.
Okay, David, thank you very much for your insights there. So it's not women officers that are the problem, it's the wrong women being employed in the vetting process. Maybe somebody with more experience, an older female, lots of different things. Donald, because at the moment they're young and inexperienced, and maybe that's just a terrible combination for a female prison guard. Donald from Cardiff, what's your view?
Oh, yes, hello there. I've been a prison officer for over 20 years, and I've had, my view is that I think that the female should stay into a female environment, because I've worked for over 20 years in the prison system, and I've seen young officers, and I've seen how they've been drawn in by these criminals, and like David just said, they're bringing drugs into the prison, they're getting caught, they're actually going to prison themselves, and it's just ridiculous. I mean,
actually, when there are arguments and when there are potential sort of testosterone-fueled bust-ups about to happen, getting a female officer in there can often just diffuse that situation quite quickly. So would that not make the argument that it's worthwhile having some female officers or wardens in there?
No, I don't know. I just think it should be male on male and female on female.
Would you, Donald, feel comfortable working in a female prison? A women's prison?
No, I would not. No, I would not feel comfortable whatsoever.
But Donald, there's already a massive shortage, understaffing and low morale in the prison system among officers. If you got rid of all the females, thousands of females working in male prisons, what would happen to people like you left behind?
Well, I agree with you, yeah, but I just think that females should stick to the, I would not like, I've been a prison officer for 20 years of my life, and I don't mind working in the male environment, but I would never, ever work in a female prison.
Donald, interesting. Thank you for your thoughts on that. Debbie from Denbighshire, what's your thoughts on female wardens in male prisons?
Oh, excuse me. Well, I rang in because my friend's daughter is a female prison officer in the Walton prison in Liverpool, and she's 27, and she recently became a prison officer. I think she's been there for about a year now. And from what she tells me, we have a bit of a laugh because she says the inmates will behave themselves more for her than they will for the bigger, more masculine presence of the male guards. And she said it's not a female simpering role model that she's given them. She's being really strong. She's telling them as it is. And they don't often know how to react to it. With a male officer, I think with all this bravado, they go up against the male officers more. And they're not quite sure how to sort of treat the woman officer. They kind of do as they're told.
Debbie, I can appreciate how that works and how that works to your granddaughters or your granddaughter's benefit. However, is your granddaughter also getting a little bit of attention from the prisoners in a sort of sexual manner? There's no accusation that she's asking for that to be brought on to herself. It just might be that that's the way the the way the prisoners react to her.
It's very difficult because obviously that's quite a broad generalisation of women in this environment. But I think she had extensive training for this job.
Okay.
And it's not a job that you'd want to go into just for male attention. I think you can get it in a lot more different ways.
Debbie, I don't think for 1 minute these female officers are going into the job for the male attention. I think it's an unintended consequence that when you have such a male environment and men that are locked up and aren't allowed to be dating and doing their normal thing, that those pent-up hormones and frustrations may just get spilled out onto the woman that is in front of them, despite maybe their reservations.
But you know, there's something else we're missing, Storm. I mean, a lot of the women who go into that job, that role of prison officer, are not kind of running around saying, "Look at me, I'm all pretty and beautiful." A lot of them are hard as nails with buzz cuts. Like, you know,
why do we have all male prisons then? If we know what it can bring, why do we have only male prisons and only female prisons?
We have only male prisons because they're men, only female prisons because they're women.
But why do we
We've always
separate?
traditionally done that. We separate that because men have a different culture, different orientation, aggressive. It's a particular way of looking after men and looking after
It's
women.
a different power dynamic, isn't it, between a prisoner to a prisoner and warden or officer, and that should stop these inappropriate relationships happening, but it's not. So I suppose that's what we're looking into.
But also, a far higher percentage of men go to prison for violent offences than women.
Yeah, but I just think there's still that concentrated environment that you will not stop this unless you stop females in male prisons, vice versa.
Debbie, thank you very much for your call. Jess from Hull, what's your view?
Hiya, so I'm actually a female prison officer in an all-male prison.
Okay.
So obviously my view on things obviously will be slightly different to most. I think a female prison officer can actually bring a lot to a male prison. As some of your other callers have said, we diffuse the situation a lot of the time because they view women as mother figures, sisters, you know, family members, and they're more happy to talk to you about personal issues, which they might not be wanting to discuss with other males because obviously there's a culture.
Jess, do you get unwanted attention?
I have done, yeah, but it's down to the prison officer to shut it down and make their stance on the matter very clear.
But what about Lynn's suggestion here? When you get young, inexperienced female officers going in there, being made to feel by highly manipulative criminal men that they are lusted after and wanted in a way that they never have done before, you can understand how that ends up in a situation that nobody wants.
Absolutely, but I started in the prison system 6-7 years ago, and I'm 28 now, so I was a young female prison officer, and I've always took the stance on it's not appropriate, and I've always shut it down. So I think it's very much dependent. Like one of your callers said, who's been to prison, they're recruiting the wrong females. They're recruiting people who aren't
Could you tell me
strong enough to shut it down.
What would be the right type of female, and how would you know that before they actually start the job? What's the right female and what's the wrong female?
In the recruitment process.
What would they exhibit to
I
say
think
they're
they
wrong?
need to change the recruitment process to put in a scenario, because you do role plays in the prison system when you're trying to apply. They need to put in a scenario where a male prisoner is trying to be inappropriate towards a female officer in the situation that you're talking about. And it also needs to be challenged a lot more sooner, because this female prison officers who are doing the inappropriate behaviour with prisoners, they will be displaying certain behaviours and attitudes towards them. It needs to be picked up on earlier and challenged by senior members of staff.
Jess, you're exactly the person I wanted to speak to today.
That's
Thank you
brilliant.
very much. It's always good. Yeah, when you're doing a topic on female
We need
prison
more
officers
prison officers
to get
like
a
Jess.
female
You asked the
prison officer on the
question.
line.
Jess is the answer. No, you heard the voice. No nonsense.
Thank you very much. Yes, I believe you would rule with an iron rod.
Yeah.
Jess, thank you very much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on that.